and welcome to TBH Beyond Borders. It's a podcast that's supposedly weekly where I talk to inspiring international students from different countries. And today I'm here with Neryssa from Malaysia. Hi, Neryssa. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm like, student. I'm not a student anymore.
But you are.
I've gone past that. I don't have concession fares.
But you are, because you are an inspiring international student, like in the sense that you're not a student currently, but you're still inspiring as an international student.
Oh, okay.
It's like Michael Jordan still doesn't play basketball, but he's an inspiring basketball player.
Oh,
Yeah, I spoke to
nice.
my lawyers about this. So this is really exciting because you're currently pursuing journalism.
Yeah.
You graduated in, I think, the mid-year of
Yeah,
2018.
July. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And currently you're working with ABC, which is really cool. Because one of the things that international students often worry about is getting a job and employment after you graduate. And I think we've had a couple of people on the podcast who are great examples of how after they graduate, they go on to do such cool things in their own field.
Yeah.
So basically I want to start with, so you pursue journalism, Bachelor's of
Journalism. Yes, I did.
So how was the experience in that?
I thought it was pretty interesting. I remember in my first year for one of my classes, one of the first classes, we entered a class, spoke to the tutor for like 5 minutes, and then he was like, all right, get out of my class, go find me a story and come back in half an hour. And you had to like go around UQ and talk to people and like try to find a story that you could talk about and find ideas and then come back. And as the first year, and it was like one of your first class during like the first 2 weeks, you're like, oh my God, is this what the job's gonna be like? But it prepared you to like learn to reach out and talk to people because stories are not going to come to you.
Exactly, yeah.
Most of the time, even when you talk to someone, you have to talk to them a lot of times before you can actually get one idea.
Right. It reminds me of, first of all, that I think he was kind of preparing you because I don't know if this is an accurate idea of journalism, but sometimes you'll be... So journalists, especially in print media, they have a deadline for a lot of pieces when the things have to go out.
Yes.
And sometimes if a story falls, you need to have another story. So you have to literally go out and get a story quickly.
Yes.
Because when I started here, one of the nicest things about coming here was to get hands-on experience. So most of my like teachers were actually, like lecturers were actually researchers. So they were like, there's a connect between the professional and the academic side.
Yeah.
So was that the same for you? Were like people who were teaching you about journalism also people who had participated in the industry?
Yeah, but a lot of them, like the tutor who told us to go out, get a story, he actually worked in Korea.
Okay.
We had our professors were usually like industry professionals, so they worked in the field for like at least a decade and then they're back to teach.
Wow.
One of them talked about how they would always talk about the experience. One of them is Peter Greste.
Yeah.
And he used to work for BBC and Al Jazeera.
Yeah.
And what happened was that when he was covering, he was a foreign correspondent in Egypt.
Egypt, yeah.
And the government thought that he and his team were like trying to talk bad about them. So he was sent to jail for like 2 years.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure
I've
heard of him.
Because UQ also has another podcast called the UQ Changemakers podcast.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And I think he was one of the guests on that podcast. And I was just blown away by how active people who are teaching at UQ are also in their own field.
Yeah.
And he was one good example of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then when you meet him, you're like, oh, you're so soft-spoken. How could they send you to jail? Because he's like really timid and he's really like kind and soft-spoken.
Yeah.
And when you expect someone who's been to Egypt, gone to jail, would be someone who's like, who commands
hard
the
as a
room.
rock.
Yeah,
Right.
harder as a rock. But I guess like in that field, if you're investigating all those huge stories, you have to learn how to blend in so that people would like point you out and be like, oh, this person might be dangerous. We had to keep an eye on them.
Yeah, but he was just the opposite. He was very nice and
nice,
soft.
really
yeah.
nice. Yeah.
One of the things that he mentions in the Changemakers podcast, which is something that people should listen to. I was very surprised that people don't listen to. Were you aware of it?
I wasn't aware of it.
One of the things that he speaks about is how he said that people who try to, it's kind of like the Streisand effect. Streisand effect refers to something like when someone tries to, especially people in power, try to hide something, it actually gets vocalized more. So a very recent incident of the Streisand effect was with this Netflix show called Patriot Act. So there's this host called Hassan Minhaj. He did a thing about Saudi Arabia, where he was criticizing the Prince of Saudi Arabia for the things that he's doing. And Saudi Arabia basically banned that episode on Netflix in Saudi Arabia, because of which a lot of people in Saudi Arabia saw the same episode on YouTube, and it went viral on YouTube.
Wow.
So while the Prince of Saudi Arabia was trying to curb the voice, he actually magnified the voice. So it's something very similar to what they talk about on the Changemakers podcast, which is that people who tried to silence him, this story became so big because people tried to silence him, is that whatever he was trying to vocalize actually became magnified.
Yeah, and it's the same with the same prince with Jamal Khashoggi.
Yes.
Yeah, when he thought that he could just kill one journalist, journalists die all the time, but now everyone's like, no.
Right.
And you can see a power play, you can see how other big countries Turkey and US, how they're trying to use that story to benefit them or try to hide some things. So even if you're not a journalist and you're a reader, you can tell yourself that, oh, okay, something is up.
Another thing that I wanted to talk about, which was I think was really interesting, what I found interesting about journalism as well as science, is that in those two fields, if you like traveling, that is a very big, it's a very huge option. In a lot of fields, traveling might not be so related to your academic or professional life, but in journalism and science, if you want to venture out, if you like traveling, if you like to explore other nations and other places, that is something that is professionally rewarded.
Yes.
So is that something that you are interested in, to cover stories not only in Australia or Malaysia, but also in other countries?
Yeah, that is what I'm interested in, but it's something that my mom is worried about, because the things that I want to that I'm interested is delving into cultures and communities and bringing up. So I wanted to be a journalist because I wanted to be a voice for the voiceless.
Right.
And there was this one time when I interned with Al Jazeera, and I was exposed to the kind of stories that they were doing. And there was journalists talking about how they got deported, or how because they exposed someone, or how they feel like they can't go back to that country, or else the officials would be waiting there. So I guess people think, oh, okay, traveling, you can relax and stuff. But, but I feel an hour, in some jobs where you travel, you work, and then you get a few days for you to roam around there and relax.
Science, yeah.
Really science? I was thinking more if you're a stewardess, kind of thing. But I feel for journalism, it really depends on the story you're doing, because if you're doing a story on something sensitive, you want to get out of there ASAP.
Right. You don't want to.
You don't want to stay. Yeah. You don't want to chill. You're always, even when you're asleep. People some of them, you have to sleep for 2 hours because they're in a war zone. Yeah. They wake up in the middle of the night and suddenly there are bombs going off, and they're like, shoot. Maybe we should cover this and then go kind of thing. Yeah.
So a lot of my news, fortunately or unfortunately, it comes from comedians. I don't watch a lot of news, but I do watch. I do consume news when it's form of comedy. So one of my favorite comedians is John Oliver, who does this show called Last Week Tonight on HBO. He actually interviewed Edward Snowden. Now, John Oliver would say 1,000 times that he's not a journalist, but everyone thinks that he is because he does the same thing.
Yep.
So he interviewed Edward Snowden, and he was talking about how when he went to Russia, even as a comedian, even as a person who's not a journalist, it was not fun. It depends on what story you're covering, and I think in most cases when journalists are traveling, they're actively on work, even if they're not interviewing someone. They're not having fun, for sure.
Yeah, and I guess because if you're a prominent person, regardless of whether you're a journalist or not, and if you go to a country where there's a lot of things they want to hide.
Yeah.
So if you're well known, they would put the focus on you, and that's not what they like, and they will always suspect oh, why are you there, kind of thing,
Right. Yeah. So it's not a pleasant thing to be.
No.
Yeah. Another thing that you spoke about, which was you mentioned how you don't just talk to people and get a story. You have to talk to them multiple times.
Yes.
And that reminded me of, so there was this book that was released called Fire and Fury, which kind of was aimed at the US presidential administration. And the author speaks about how for most of all the incriminating details that he got, for most of it, all he did was talk to people. That was it. A lot of what he portrayed as journalism, I think he mentions that a lot of it is talking to people.
Yes,
at the base of it.
Yes, it is. Sometimes you get a story in conversations that you think that you're not going to get a story. Like, it could be an informal conversation where you're
Right,
talking about,
right.
hey, how was your party? And then they could be talking about the party, and suddenly there's like, they let out a fact that
Right.
could be incriminating, and you're like, oh, shoot. Wow, okay. Kind of thing. And I guess when people are comfortable, you don't really keep track of what you say, the things you
Right,
say,
right, right.
especially if you're talking to someone that you're used to talking to. So you wouldn't suspect that they would
Yeah.
go against you, or that one small word or one sentence could be a game changer.
Yeah. But is that what normally happens? Like people talking about subject A reveal just one little thing about subject B, and then subject B becomes the story.
It does happen a lot where, so what we do is that we can't get attached to our ideas, because sometimes when you go into the field, so let's say you have a hypothesis kind of thing, and then you go there and you find out, okay, that's not actually the case, but then you find another story.
Yeah.
For example, when I did an attachment of the ABC radio, we had there was this report about how there was like about 1,000, the statistics about how there was a lot of people, indigenous people, who were incarcerated and died when they were like in custody.
Yeah.
Whereas in New South Wales, there wasn't that many. So you think, oh, okay, so does that mean like there's more police brutality in Queensland? So you call them up to like ask them more questions. But it turns out that they were like, no, that could not be the case. Maybe in Queensland, they're more transparent. And because in Queensland, like they've had the data from 10 years ago, whereas for like New South Wales, it's not that transparent. It's only from 1 year ago, so you can't really compare. You can't see things just from looking at the facts. And so because of that, like the story changes, because you're like, okay, you can't just like go with the original idea, because if you do that, then it's not true and it's not news. You know,
it's not facts, because
it's not fact. And you have to accept that the initial idea that you have, even if you like plan it a lot, you might not go according to plan, so you have to go for plan B, or you need to like learn how to improvise.
Yeah. So there are so many parallels that just by talking to you that I'm discovering between science and journalism, where there is obviously there's research in both cases.
Yes.
There's also the aspect of statistics and data and how to interpret it in the most correct way.
Yes.
There's also the fact that you can't be subjective. Your interpretation or your hypothesis or your theory has to be objective and reproducible. Because like especially in your case, you can't. In science, I don't think there's so much. There's not a lot of bias that comes out of opinions. I think with journalism, and journalists are really professional people, but say if I was to get into it, I don't think I would be as, especially if I'm covering something that's really close to me emotionally. I am willing to admit that there would be some bias subconsciously on that. But it also happens in science, where researchers who have held one belief for a very long time, they only seem to fixate on any data that shows something that's positive to them. And there's also a name for it
that supports their...
Yeah. There's like a term for it that I'm not remembering right now. But and the other thing between science and journalism is that whatever you do publish, it has to be you can't have opinions attached to it. It has to be something that's as close to fact as possible.
Yeah, sure. And also, you have to test out a theory. It doesn't work out, you have to do it all over again, kind of thing.
And also the improvising factor that you mentioned, that's also very, very true. Because, I mean, we are both starting out in our respective fields. But, even now, I think you would agree that, I would do one experiment, and at first I just think it's going to A. But then in the middle of it, I'll find some data that kind of, it changes everything.
Yeah.
Then you have to quickly have a new plan and go another direction.
And even there's a lot of pressure, and you're like, oh no, what do I do now? Because like when you're planning for A, you had a lot of time, but not for B, and you have like a really short amount of time, and you're like, oh no, what do I do? I mean, in terms of bias, when you mentioned it, I feel like every journalist has a bias. I feel like for me, it would be bias where it comes to like my past experience, whether it's as a female or as a Muslim or like, as a woman of color. But what the important thing to do is that you have to, one, be conscious of your bias, because a lot of times you're not really conscious of be conscious of it. And when you're writing news, you don't do it alone. You have to go. It has to go through an editor and other people. You get other people to read it so that they'll be like, oh, okay, I feel like you're being a bit too strong there. Oh, you shouldn't use that word.
So basically, like the journalism equivalent of science is peer review system.
Yeah, peer review system. Yeah. And people think that journalists work alone, but even if you're going to like investigative, like Peter, like he wouldn't have gone alone. There's no way you would have been able to do it alone, because people will come together to plan it. There's always plan B. There's when I was doing an attachment of Al Jazeera, I can't give names or like the story, but
no, definitely not.
Yeah, obviously. But they had a couple of journalists who were covering the story, and they weren't sure. But then, like on the way back, like on the way back, they were like, oh shoot, I think we just exposed something.
Yeah.
And we're being chased right now, so we have to go to the airport. So they left like some of the things, like some of their memory cards. So another journalist had to come in disguise as a tourist from like overseas and like take that from them.
Wow.
Kind of thing.
Yeah. That's speaking of covering news in other countries, and also you also willing to branch out to other countries, not necessarily Malaysia and Australia.
Yeah.
Was that one of your first report as the first author posted a week back? On 7th of Feb.
You remember the date? I didn't remember.
Was about the right-wing Hindu nationalists in India.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really. I was really. It was really interesting that your first story, was something that I could relate to because it was in my home country. So for those who might not know, so essentially you covered about how right-wing Hindu nationalist groups, they were kind of arrested for. They were kind of like having this
celebrating Gandhi's death, and then they had like a effigy of him. So basically, like, how do I say it?
Wasn't it like a pillow with his
something
face?
With his face on it, and they had a gun and just shot him. Kind of thing.
It's just really. So that story obviously saddened me because what they were kind of. And this is a little dark, so I don't want to get too much into it. But basically, they were kind of celebrating Gandhi's death, but they were also celebrating his assassinator. Yes. And I think it was really interesting to have your perspective on it, even though it was objective and it was factual, because I would imagine that was a very difficult story for you because the reason that they were kind of praising the assassinator of Gandhi was because he believed that Gandhi was too nice to the Muslims.
Yes.
And the party that got arrested that you covered in your report were actually people who don't like Muslims.
Yeah.
So I imagine it would be a rather difficult story for you to, especially when you're reading all these things about what their beliefs.
Yeah.
As someone who's Muslim, I don't think it would be very easy on you.
I was actually surprised reading the story because I didn't really understand. Why are they shooting Gandhi? I thought people like Gandhi.
Yeah.
But and then I read more about it. I was like, and I feel like I'm at the point where I can't. I guess people think that Muslims are always oppressed, and I don't know how to say this. I mean, in some ways we are, but at the same time, like I have to be aware that not all Muslims are nice. Like in Saudi Arabia, how they are treating. So I take religion out of it, and I'm thinking it's just people taking religion too far, kind of thing. So it's even the same with people who are like against Muslims, because I know it's because of the way they were brought up, and also how they're controlled by the environment and government.
Yeah.
And you know how like it's not just in India, it's everywhere. Like even in Malaysia, the US, even developed countries, how they use religion or like the use of the other to make people feel divided. It's easier to divide people.
Yeah.
And there's this theory, but I forgot the name of the theory, but it's more on how they labeled someone as different or as the other so that we can put them aside and demonize them, kind of thing.
Yeah. I think a lot of that also happened because both of our countries were colonized.
Yes.
And a lot of history that I've read, a huge reason why colonization in India lasted as long was that Britishers used the tactic where they would demonize Muslims against the Hindus and Hindus against the Muslims. And I'm not sure, and again, I'm not a professional or a very educated person to comment on this, but I'm not sure, but it is possible that what we are seeing in India with the extremist groups is maybe like relics of the notion that was spread during colonization.
Yeah.
But that is true that a lot of times groups will demonize the other group.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Yeah, and it's the same in Malaysia, but it's not in terms of religion. When the British colonized us, so we have the three main races are Indian, Chinese, and Malay.
Yeah.
So, but when they colonized us, they would give us different jobs and put us in bases in different areas. So that's to divide us because they knew that if we were cohesive, then we would be able to fight back.
Yeah.
But racial discrimination and racial tension is still evident up until today.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And I feel like it's a product of that. And it has lingered and we've let it manifest
Yeah. And I think there are obviously people who are using it who are kind of actively, even if it was a takeaway from the British rule, there are still people who are actively kind of trying to grow that spirit because
Yep.
it benefits them.
Yep.
Because that's how you control people, is that if you don't have a villain, you have to use things like reasoning and logic to control
Yeah.
people. But religion is such an easy scapegoat
Yeah.
to control
Religion
people.
and race. And like
Yeah.
to like if you use anger,
Yeah.
then people would be people when you're angry you don't think.
Yeah.
So if you get people to be angry, they can't think logically and they'll just hate on them and they'll blindly hate on a group or someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The another interesting thing, speaking about groups and speaking about Indians in Malaysia. So, like you said, Malay, Chinese, and India are the
Yeah.
three main populations in Malaysia. And not to propagate any stereotypes, but I found it really, really, really interesting that 30% of all doctors in Malaysia have studied in India.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
That's
true. I have
interesting,
a friend who's like who's studying in India to do medicine. And I feel like a lot of them either go to India or like Russia.
Right,
I'm
right,
not sure is
right.
it because it's cheap?
Yeah.
It's like that. I don't know.
I think, I think medical institutions are seem to be really popular in India
Yeah.
because
Are they really good? I'm really asking, like, is it good in
I
India?
think it is. I think
I'm sure
some
it
of
is.
them are really
Yeah.
good. Like because I was initially when I got out of school, one of the things that I was considering doing was medicine. And I mean, being a doctor would be really cool. So as a
Having the
society,
name doctor, they're like, oh, okay.
but then I realized something called a PhD. So I'm kind of doing that now. I'm like, I just take this longer shortcut.
Yeah.
So, but as a society in India, and I'm sure it's with most countries, but as a society in India, we're very we're consumed by the status symbol that doctors get. So we're very, very like doctors are very respectful. That's like if you're a doctor, everyone loves you, adores you. It's like after celebrity, there's doctors.
Yes.
So I don't know if because of that admiration as a society for doctors, is that the reason most of us get into medicine? Maybe. But we also have institutions that are really, really good. Like people have to study so hard to get into those, and so the byproduct of that is that the people who are studying there are like the smartest people in the end. Like they're the smartest 300 people from a fraction of 1 billion people. Like the generation who's studying for that
The
exam.
percentage is like really tiny.
And so I would think that kind of it starts like a looping system where the people who are graduating from that those institutions are really, really smart, and that also like comes back because alumni will also donate, help out. So that kind of like helps out the institution over time. And some of them are really good. One of them that a few of my friends go to, I realized that Manipal University, they're actually setting up a university in Malaysia because it's so popular. Yeah. So that was really interesting because it's such a
You always
positive.
think of like, oh, the big names like Oxford kind of thing, you know, but you never
no one
think
thinks
that.
about Manipal University.
Yeah.
But it was a very wholesome thing that I got to hear. Like it's not just like Indians and doctors is something that's propagated in pop culture, but it's also this was like the positive side of the stereotype that yes, that's nice. And another similarity between both of our countries and cultures is that we have obsession
food.
over. Yes, I was just coming to that. We have obsession over food, especially. So we have chai, which is a tea, which is like hot milk tea.
Yes.
And you have teh
Curry,
tarik.
yep.
Yes. And I was like, that's really interesting.
And if anyone tries to claim, oh, that's ours, they're like, no, it's not.
No, wait, it is ours, right? Is it not?
I feel like what you're saying, like if
chai?
someone else from like, just say someone from Malaysia is like, oh yeah, we invented chai, you would be triggered.
No. I would be a bit.
Apparently.
I would be like, okay, listen, here's the facts, because there's the Indian Muslim population who brought it to Malaysia way back. Yeah. So there aren't a lot of things that we are proud of as Indians, but chai, we are. That's the hill that we are willing to die
And
on.
it's like curry, I guess.
Yeah. You also have the lasik nama.
Yeah, the coconut milk, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, you said it.
Oh,
Nasi
okay.
lemak, yeah.
That's also, it's not very similar to, I don't think it's directly, I think it's more indigenous than anything that we have. But it's also interesting that the coconut curry is something. So I'm Hindu, but I'm also half Zoroastrian. So I have I have ancestors who are from Iran and Persia. So Zoroastrians have this dish called curry chawal, which basically means curry and rice. And that curry is a coconut curry. So while I think it's a national dish now. That's
Nasi lemak, yeah.
Yeah. While it has not much of a connection, maybe it has some of a connection with South Indian because coconuts are widely used. But I was also interested that it was also vaguely connected to a Persian dish because Malaysia did have influence from not only India and China.
Middle East.
Yes,
So, yeah.
yes. So it was just really interesting to kind of like backtrace the influence that Malaysia
Yeah,
has.
and before we got colonized, it was nice. Everyone visited, and then we got colonized. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Joel, also around the Second World War, there was also a bit of Japanese influence that Malaysia had,
Yeah,
right?
and so I like Japanese culture and stuff, but I feel like everyone always sees them as a victim. But
Right.
if you're from Southeast Asia, you would
Right.
see them as the bullies kind of
Right.
thing. So I guess more Japanese imperialism,
Yeah, yeah.
like they kicked the British out, but then they came in,
Yeah.
kind of thing. We do have a lot of Japanese influence because our current prime minister, Mahathir, who's 93,
That's
he was
Mahathir Mohamad, right?
Mahathir
Yes.
Mohamad. He was a prime minister like in the 80s for 20 years.
Yeah.
But he cultivated he did establish a good relations with Japan. So
Yeah.
now like we have a lot of like Japanese grocers, Japanese blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And like some things that you don't even think is from Japan, but then when you research into it, you're like, oh, it's actually a Japanese brand kind
Yeah.
of thing.
So there is now it's at a point where the relations are largely positive.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really nice. Speaking of relations that might not be very positive,
Yes.
one of the things that I've not discovered, but kind of observed over various podcasts is that countries who share borders or countries who share close like cultural heritage are often also
Are you
countries
talking
that
about Singapore?
I was referring to Indonesia and Singapore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I did. I guess I'm not so triggered for Indonesia because because I always get mistaken as Indonesian. Sometimes I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. But if it's Singaporean, I'm like, no, I am Malaysian, kind of thing. I think because Singapore, especially, used to be a part of Malaysia.
Yeah, yeah. Then
You
they,
know?
in like 1965,
1960s, we were like kicked
expelled,
out
yeah.
and stuff. I feel like Singapore is like the more successful younger sibling that you're kind of jealous of, but you're also like proud of. But at the same time, because they feel like they're more successful, they're like, okay, we can claim the things you created. And I'm like, no.
Right, right.
But it's more of a friendly rivalry. It's like Australia and New Zealand kind of thing. I feel
Right.
like it's not like India and Pakistan kind of thing. It's more like a friendly rivalry, and we're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I normally speak about India and Pakistan. Today, it's not an occasion I would choose to speak about India and Pakistan.
Another time.
Not a good time, yeah.
Not a good time.
Is how you experienced and like why did you choose UQ and why did you choose Brisbane?
Why did I choose? I chose. Okay, let's go for the bigger picture, like
Yes.
Australia, because my parents are like reluctant to send me overseas, even though my dad studied abroad,
Okay.
and he was like, "You can do journalism and communications in Malaysia." So Australia was good because it wasn't too far.
Yeah.
When I researched into the universities, I heard about the Big 8 universities.
Yes, the
which
group
is-
of 8.
The group of
Yeah.
8. And UQ was one of them. And when I did a bit more research, they were like communications and all that is much more hands-on.
Yep.
Even though if you went to University of Sydney or like Melbourne will be good, but I wanted something that was more hands-on and not theoretical.
Yeah, yep.
Because especially you want to work in the field, like you're not going to think of theories. You're just
Yeah.
going to be there and you're not
Yeah.
really going to think. You just have to do.
So you want that balance between yes, theory but also more hands-on.
Practical, yeah.
Yeah. Because
Which was true in the first class,
so you were quite happy in that first class because yes, this is what you wanted.
Yeah. But we were on the 8th floor, so you had to go down the elevator and kind of things. So it was like not fun because it was in the afternoon. It was after lunch, and you're like, I just want to sit down, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really nice that so a lot of people go from Australia, Brisbane to UQ. Like that's the linear path of choosing where to study.
Yeah.
For you, I guess it was Australia, UQ, and then UQ happened to be in Brisbane.
Yes.
Which is interesting because for me it was UQ happened to be in Brisbane, and Brisbane happened to be in Australia.
Oh, why did you choose UQ then?
Because of the course.
course.
Because again, like one of the reasons that I wanted to study abroad was that India is really good at engineering and business and medicine. It's good at theoretical science,
Yeah.
theoretical side of pure sciences,
Yeah.
as I think was the same with journalism in Malaysia.
Yeah.
But I wanted more hands-on. So that was the same reason why Again, here I get to, like right now, I'm doing a master's, I'm doing my coursework, but along with my coursework, I get 1 year of hands-on research. So I'm kind of working with...
Oh, you're doing your master's.
Right,
Oh,
yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's like, oh, undergrad.
No, did you actually think I was like, a lot of people guess that I'm 25, 26?
I don't know. I feel like, oh, you shouldn't judge a person just because they have a beard, you know?
Because that's what I've seen. I actually wanted to plot like data on a graph about this, but every time I shave a beard and ask a stranger or like a acquaintance or a mutual friend of how old they think I am, the answer is always less than 22.
No.
When I have a beard, the answer is like 25. Yeah.
That's why you keep the beard, so that you won't be carded at, like, when you buy drinks.
I'm also in science, so I don't drink.
Oh.
No, I don't.
Really?
No, but I don't
Okay.
get the time here. Also, no, Mom, I don't drink.
No, he doesn't drink.
Um,
He mixes alcohol in the lab, but that's pretty much it.
yeah, the only 70% ethanol that I use is for sterilization purposes. So also as a Muslim, so I know in Muslims there are different sects and there are different kind of the divisions.
Yeah.
And I would guess, and not the most informed person, but I would guess that different sects would have different rules or different things that they follow.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that Muslims follow is they avoid alcohol. Is that something that's also prominent? Because Malaysia is also an Islamic state.
Yep.
Like Islam is the official religion.
Yep.
So how is Malaysian alcohol?
Oh, I mean, they're strict with alcohol, but
Right.
they won't stop you if you order a drink, kind of thing. A lot of Muslims drink.
Okay.
And I mean, a lot of Malay Muslims drink.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen them and
Yeah.
stuff, but it's just like, because restaurants, if they serve alcohol, we can't like, stop them. It's more on the like the halal aspect of it. It's just the meat. How is the meat like slaughtered kind of thing.
So basically,
A lot of restaurants have alcohols because we have like non-Muslims too and tourists. So
Right,
they would
right,
want to order drinks.
Yeah.
And
So
so,
there's no like alcohol is allowed in the sense that like the country doesn't have jurisdiction to prevent the sale of
no,
alcohol.
but when it comes to society, they would look down on you and be
Right,
like, oh,
right,
are you
right.
drinking?
But there's no
kind of
legal
thing.
aspect. to
No,
it,
there's no
right.
legal aspect of it.
Because there are states, there's a couple of states, I think one state comes to mind, which is Gujarat. So that's it's called, so that state you can't legally buy alcohol.
Oh.
That's
I guess it depends on the state too, because for KL, it's a bit more.
lenient.
I feel a bit more lenient because we're
Tourism.
more diverse, not just for
Oh,
tourism,
okay,
but
yeah.
we're more diverse in religion. Where there's some parts of Malaysia which is like really predominantly Muslim, and that's where the child marriages are. But you know, so I feel I can't really speak for them, but I
Right.
feel like they would be strict,
Right.
and I can't imagine them having a lot of places that serves alcohol anyway,
Right.
because there's not going to be a market there, and it's like there's least likely that there'll be a lot of tourists coming
Yeah.
there anyway.
So it would be, it wouldn't
Unless
be,
you could stay at like a hotel, like a big chain hotel like the Hilton. Obviously, they will
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
alcohol, but other than that, it's like not really.
Yeah. So amongst your peers, especially peers who are Muslim, so is that common for them to, like, is the abstinence from alcohol prominent, or are people like,
I guess it depends. I feel like they're more strict when it comes to eating pork.
right.
Yeah, but when it comes to alcohol, I guess because like to them it's like, oh, you just drink. Whereas
Right.
for pork, you actually have to chew kind of thing. You're like you're like, oh no, I'm sinning. Whereas you're drinking, just take a shot, and you're like, oh, okay, it's gone. Did I even drink?
So you know how I mentioned that a lot of my news comes from comedians, and I also mentioned
Yeah.
Hassan Minhaj.
Yeah.
So now this is a intersecting Venn diagram of both news coming from comedians and also Hassan Minhaj. So
Yeah.
he makes this joke where, so he's a Muslim in the
Yeah.
US, and he talks about how his cousins, they all like drink and they would also do drugs, but they draw a line at pork.
Which is funny because like in the Quran it says don't eat pork, so just don't eat. But for like alcohol, stay away, so like don't even be like near it,
Right.
you know, kind of thing. But we're like
So there's
Oh.
like, so in like,
people pick and choose, I guess, in every religion what they
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
follow,
yeah.
you know. But I guess for me personally, like without like people control, like the government or like groups controlling, for me like if someone wants to go, that's their relationship with God kind of thing.
yeah.
You know, and I can't say that I'm perfect too, you know. I feel no one's perfect, but I
Yeah.
don't think God's gonna be like, it's not your business on how God will punish them. Like that's between them and God, you know.
Right. Like more of an individualistic relationship. Like
yeah, when it comes to religion, it should be like that person and God,
Right,
not
right.
you and that person and God, you know.
That's really, that's really deep. I really like
Oh,
that.
really?
Yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah,
like that.
okay.
Yeah. So
I think because I only started practicing and wearing the headscarf when I was 16.
Yeah.
It was the same with my parents. We only started practicing then. So before that, like my parents went clubbing. And I was like, people were shocked when I started wearing this because they never expected that I actually knew how to pray kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I guess because I've been on both sides, I can be a bit more understanding
Yeah.
kind of thing. Whereas like I find that before that, I've had those people who are really religious and they would like, come at me and that would turn me off even more.
Right.
But it was
right.
only after like I met some people they talked about how like like God's not gonna spend their time punishing people all the time.
Right.
God is actually merciful.
Yeah.
And that was when I started. Oh, okay, maybe like that's nice to hear.
Yeah. So otherwise you were deterred by the by people who were kind of
staunchly.
Yeah.
Because I guess in my view, I was like, oh, if God's always gonna punish, then doesn't matter what I do,
Right.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's also really interesting. So like what helped your transition from not wearing a headscarf to wearing a headscarf?
I remember 1 month before I started wearing it, I told my friends, because my friends were talking about, oh yeah, you started praying right now and stuff. I was like, yeah, I mean, like, but I'm not gonna wear the hijab. If you see me wearing the hijab, you can slap me. And 1 month later, I'm like, oh, hello. I don't know. I remember my mom wore it 1 week before I did.
Yeah.
And when I talked to my parents about wanting to wear it, they were really worried because they were like, look, you don't have to wear it.
Yeah.
Like we're not forcing you just because your mom is wearing it right now.
Yeah.
We don't want you to feel obliged. You're still going to be your
Right.
daughter and blah, blah, blah. That doesn't show whether you're religious or whether God loves you or
Yeah,
not.
that's not the factor that decides how religious you are. Yeah.
But I just started wearing it and I just haven't stopped ever since. I feel like in a world where you're always judged by the way you look and stuff, I feel like when I appear, people are like, oh, where am I going to look? I guess can't look at her boobs or her hair, so I got to look at her face kind of thing and listen to what she has to say.
That's because I've spoken to a lot of people even back home because, again, India is one of the countries with a very high population of Muslims. I think we're second in the world. In some families, it's oppressing in the sense that people, like girls have to wear it.
Yeah.
And in some families, it's like they have a choice and a lot of people go for it. And there are different reasons, like some people go for the identity because they're proud of the identity. Some people go because it makes them feel empowered. And I also think it's really interesting because currently in the world, like hijab is something that often comes in scrutiny in a very in a bad sense,
like
in controversial sense, where now people associate a hijab with a religion, but not in the good sense. And that was also very true with Sikhs. Sikhs have a very distinct appearance. Yes, the turban. And there's also controversy regarding that. So I think it's really interesting, and I would guess that it would be empowering because it's not easy. Like I would guess it. Like this one time I grew a beard for 7 months. So, then I'm a brown guy with a beard, and that's a look that socially isn't very acceptable. And I got a lot of looks because of it, but I also weirdly found myself feel really empowered, where it was like, yes, like, so what? Like, I know who I am. This wouldn't, like, discourage me. So, what is, like, how is it for you on a daily basis? Like,
especially since I just want to state that there are like communities where the girl is forced to, and I feel like that's wrong. Obviously, to like force a girl whether to like wear a hijab or don't wear a hijab, or anyone to like force anyone to wear anything that they don't want. But for me, it's empowering, and it can be a bit tiring because like for like even among the Muslims, if you don't cover up, they see something. You cover up, they're like, oh, you're not covered up enough kind of thing. Or people who are non-Muslims and stuff, they think that just because you're wearing this scarf around your head, then you could either be dumb or you're oppressed or something like that.
Right.
But for me, but it makes me more empowered to prove them all wrong. And to like do what I can. Like even for something simple like going to the gym, I still go to the gym and they're like, oh, how do you do that? Isn't it hot? But to me, I'm like, but then I tell them like, if something as simple as a scarf around my head, a piece of cloth around my head is enough to stop me from doing something, then I'm not trying hard enough.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I do feel it's a bit sad that you just have to try harder than a lot of people just because you look a certain or you look or dress a certain way.
Yeah.
But then when you're not really when you prove them wrong, but when you like show them that you're more than what you wear
Right.
or like what you believe in, like religiously,
Yeah.
then it's a really nice feeling. Like you said about how I'm wearing, like even though there are some people who look down on you, but you're like, hey, this is my identity, this is who I am. In
Yeah,
fact,
I think I was just having like a rebellious phase, I think, where because I actually kept it out of like because of vanity in the sense that I was just lazy to
okay.
shave it for a very long time. And at one point I was like, I just want to see where this goes. Like I
Yeah.
just want to see how long I can go. And I was also very curious. Like I've never had like a huge beard. I was just like, how is it? Like, like it just like
Yeah.
I had nothing else to do. So I was like, I'll just grow, I guess. It's a very simple thing not
Yeah.
to shave,
Yeah.
There's no effort that goes
Yeah.
into it.
Like a washing your beard, I guess.
Yeah, I actually I started like
Shampooing and conditioning.
yeah. I actually became like this. I don't know who. I was like, wow, I used to put oil, and I was like, wow, who is this guy? Is that like beard oil and things like that? And I was like, and it's also beard culture in Australia, especially. A lot of people have huge beards, and it's like, I don't know. It's like some people have a beard as an identity, like
Yeah.
not even Muslim people, just like people,
No,
men in general.
Yep.
They just have, and there's so many like people passionate about maintaining a beard, and they're so academically and like they're so
Like
educated.
trimming it and also.
Yeah, they're like people who like are so passionate about this niche subject.
Yeah.
And I kind of got to discuss, educate myself on all of that, and that was really interesting. But overall, I just felt like I was doing it because it was like, it's very similar to your reason, where it's like, I know that socially it's not encouraged. It's
Yeah.
kind of looked down upon.
Yeah.
But it's also like, I'm kind of normalizing it. Like if they see more of me, that's one step closer of them being used to that image around
Yeah.
their surroundings.
Representation. So,
Right,
yeah.
right. Because I think it's fair to say that, and this is not so much in India, because India, again, Muslim population
Yeah.
is a prominent
And
population.
even when you're not Muslim, like some people just wear like a cloth loosely
Right.
around your head anyway.
Yeah.
Like, yes.
But I would guess that in Western countries or in Australia, people aren't as used to
Yeah.
people wearing the scarf or the hijab.
Yeah.
So I would feel like it is something that people are hyper aware of.
Yes.
Like I don't think people can quite easily put aside the fact that you're wearing a hijab. I think
Yeah.
it comes to them as it's hard for I think you're kind of promoting, or you're kind of like provoking a battle in them to fight their own stereotypes.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Yeah,
really
even like
interesting.
wherever I go, like if I'm the only person there in a headscarf, like it feels prominent to me that okay, you're different here,
Right.
kind of thing. Even for yourself, you know that okay,
Yeah.
there's something different about me from
Yeah.
everyone else here. I guess, yeah,
And it's also, I would assume that it's also a good feeling to be able to be okay with you being different. Because
Yeah.
at first I wasn't like, I guess even now, like people in general aren't okay with standing out in the
Yeah.
crowd.
Yeah.
They're not okay with being different.
now everyone wants to feel like they belong.
Right,
you know?
right. So I would guess that you doing this for so many years, even in not just in your home country, but also in a country where this is not prominent,
Yeah,
it must feel really good to have to be just okay with yourself and being okay with standing out. And I think that's really it's commendable. I don't have the
Oh,
courage to do
thank
something
you.
like that.
I feel like a lot of it's true. Like a lot of people feel like they want to belong, but at the same time, part of them wants to be individualistic as
Right,
well. Like a
right,
part of them wants to like same, but like a bit different. I don't know how to describe it,
No,
but like you have your own personality.
But
Yeah.
you're also kind of that's something that I also wanted to talk about, but in relation to journalism, because when I'm doing research, or when I'm going around, or when I'm just like, no matter what I do, I am myself. I am Marshall. I'm individualistic. Like there's so much of my personality, but I'm constantly aware that I'm also associated and attached to the Indian identity.
Yeah.
Because I think I look very Indian. I talk Indian. You know, of course I am from India.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm very proud of that.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't I've not tried to step away from that, because why would I? I'm really proud of it.
Yeah.
But at the same
You
time,
shouldn't step out of it.
but at the same time, I am aware that a lot of people, because while you would expect people to see you as Mershaw, this individual that has its own personalities, irrespective of what identities attached to
Yeah.
him, people will also see it as, okay, he's an Indian,
Oh,
right?
yep.
And I think that's also something that might be related to you and journalism, because while you are Neryssa, your individual person with all your unique personality traits doing journalism, people might also see you as a journalist who is Muslim
Yeah, the
and a
visual
woman.
aspect of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and like a Muslim woman
Yeah.
in journalism.
Yeah.
And for you, I would guess that it's very positive, especially because it'll be empowering to a lot of women, especially in disadvantaged groups.
Yeah.
So while I would understand that you wouldn't like yourself being attached to an identity, I think your identity is really, really nice, because especially in journalism, because globally, Muslim women is, it does, it's a great thing to have, especially given how disadvantaged women and Muslims both are.
Yep. That's true, because I actually used my difference to an advantage. I even put it in my cover letter and stuff to show that. And what I do, I don't just make it to seem like, oh yeah, this is how I am, kind of thing. It's more on, look, different. I'm different, but that's not a bad thing, because
Yeah.
it means that when we interview people, I would be more aware of like the cultural differences. I might
Right.
be aware of the privilege in place. I mean, like, I'm not saying white people can't be journalists. They can, and they're really good journalists. But I guess when it comes to talking to communities where like maybe English is in their first language, or their cultural nuances, and if you're someone who hasn't traveled much,
Yeah.
it doesn't even matter what ethnicity or race you are. If
Yeah.
you're someone who hasn't traveled much, you might, it's likely that you'll make mistakes or to come off as insensitive kind of thing.
Yep.
So I use my identity as a way for me to like show that I'm different from everyone else. I think that helped me get the job at the EBC, even if it's just a casual job. But
Yeah.
because right now, especially in the newsroom, they want to be more diverse.
Right,
Because when
right.
when you're talking to different people, you need to have different perspectives and
Right.
stuff. So that helps a lot.
And especially, I don't know if you've followed, but a lot of brands recently have made a lot of controversial mistakes just because
Yeah.
they didn't have a larger perspective.
Yeah. Are you talking about like what was that? Was it Gucci or something
Yeah,
like
they
that?
did
Where
that.
they had the blackface
racial,
thing.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I didn't want to name them just in
Yeah.
case Gucci wants to sponsor my
Oh, shit.
podcast. But no, but yeah, there's also this thing that happened with Katy Perry's sandals.
Shoes,
Yes.
yeah.
And it just like everyone on the internet was, they weren't mad as much as they were amused by the fact that they didn't see this. Like these brands were kind of surprised, like, oh wait, that is wrong. Like they
Yeah.
were like,
And
so-
half the time it's like you're not sure. Are you just doing it for publicity,
yes.
kind of thing, or are you really that ignorant,
Right.
kind of thing?
And I would like to assume that it's because if it's the publicity thing, that's just
It's
that
horrible.
that's horrible.
It's horrible. Yeah.
For my sanity, I will just assume that it's the ignorance.
Yeah.
And that could just be solved by hiring a person of color who would obviously at the first instant tell you that this is not.
Now maybe
cool.
that's not okay, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree when you say that ABC actually benefits from hiring different perspectives.
Yep.
Because that gives them more of a understanding, and it also helps them be more sensitive
Yep.
to really sensitive issues.
Yeah.
Coming into journalism, Malaysia, and you. Again, I just had this thought, okay, that remember when I mentioned that, while you are and I am an individual, people associate me and you to an identity. And I kind of think that I've done the same thing because I was talking to you about you being a Muslim. So I'm not sure if I'm kind of doing the same thing, that I'm also trying to criticize.
I guess like some people feel like, oh, you're stereotyping. She's more than that kind of thing. But for me, it's like I don't mind talking about these things because I feel like the connotation that comes with the stereotype of being a Muslim or a Muslim woman is always negative, or people have like some skewed perception of it. Whereas like I feel like it's nice for me to be able to like
give an authentic perspective.
Yeah, give another perspective and be like, and make people realize that you're stereotyping people, and even though people put stereotypes to understand a certain group, they forget that, like that's just a generalization. There are people are individuals, and they're always different kind of thing.
Another interesting thing that I discussed with you earlier with journalism is that so Malaysia and also India and a lot of other nations, I guess there's a connection between how developed a nation is and the freedom of press and speech. But Malaysia is another nation where freedom of press is not as high, because there have been reports that showed that a lot of news organizations are actually controlled by the politicians or political parties,
Yep.
which is again something that also is similar with ABC that's kind of coming up right now. Is that true? Or
I feel like I know that was the issue because we're partly subsidized, but it doesn't mean that I guess a lot of politicians, they would want to like get control of it so they can push their own agenda.
Yeah,
Whereas
yeah.
we're like, if you do something problematic, I don't care if you're part of the government, we're gonna say it, you know.
So
kind of
that's
thing.
really important to have the editorial separate from political. So is that because of the freedom of press being a bit lower than expected in countries like Malaysia? Is that what is that what motivated you to go into journalism?
Well, okay, when it comes to freedom of press in like countries that are developing, and I'm
Yeah.
just saying developing because countries that were colonized and they couldn't like develop as like first world countries
Right.
because they were held back kind of
Right.
thing. And because of that, there are like different models of like journalism.
Yeah.
Like it's freer in some countries than it is even in like America, UK, and Australia. It might be the level of like freedom that you have might be different kind of
Yeah.
thing. For developing countries, there's this like theory, like there's this model where they're like the government is like, oh, okay, we're developing and we want to introduce new policies. So the media, you should work together with us so that we can like people can understand the policies more.
Right.
But I think right now, like some people, they take advantage of it and they take control of the media.
Yeah.
Like there are some countries like in the East, which I shall not name
Yeah.
because I don't want to be attacked. That's what they do, and that's how they control the people, and
Right.
people think a certain way, kind of thing. But it wasn't the reason why I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to be a journalist because growing up, I used to like writing stories. I used to like stories. I liked reading, and even whether it's like a book or the newspaper, I just enjoyed reading. And after watching like documentaries or news about people oppressed, it wasn't even thinking about the Muslims aspect of it, but it could be any group. It doesn't matter what religion or background they are. And I wanted to do what I can to be the voice for those who are the voiceless.
Right.
I mean, it might be hard if you're like, people are like, oh, but you're a Muslim woman of color, it's hard for you to be heard. But like, I want to do whatever I can,
Yeah. No, but it's really there's also something like telling stories
Yeah.
at the base of it.
Yeah.
Especially, I think in your case, telling stories of people. There's also something that I resonate with highly. This is also something that this podcast kind of
It's about.
achieves. Yes. And also why one of the things that I want to do is I want to get into documentary filmmaking. Because, fictional filmmaking is fun and I
Yeah.
love that. But I think it's also like emotionally more rewarding, like morally more rewarding for me to do documentaries where I'm showing stories that people kind of don't want to see, but they should see.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a sentiment that often resonates with journalism, where it's like that not all stories are stories that people would be delighted to hear,
Yeah.
but they are stories that people need to hear.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like sometimes I look at it because I'm working on the digital news desk, so we're
Yeah.
working with like social media and a website. And some of the comments we see are like people are like, "Oh no, this is fake news," kind of thing. But the only reason why they think it's fake news because it offers a perspective that they don't agree with.
Right.
And I think, but sometimes people need to understand that, opinions are opinions.
Yeah.
But they're not facts, and sometimes sometimes like some news stories they do. I do acknowledge that like there are some like meet people who like news organizations where they just tailor the news stories just to get people to like hear what they want or like read what they want.
Yeah.
But for like the ABC or like the ones that I really want to work for, I want to make sure that it's not what people want to hear, but it's
Yeah.
what people need to hear.
Right.
Kind of thing.
The thing that you mentioned about tailoring news stories, while we have this theme going on in the podcast about science and journalism, another parallel that I was able to draw was that, so in journalism, there are news organizations and, the shady or extremist.
10 reasons why this person is blah blah blah.
Yeah, so they're the most extremist,
Yeah.
unconventional news hubs, which kind of manipulate data in the sense that they get a news story that aligns with whatever they want to propagate.
Yep.
And a very similar thing that happens in the scientific which is also related to the vaccination thing. The reason the entire anti-vaccination thing is up is because there's this one scientist in one paper, which, by the way, he lost his doctorate. They took his doctorate away. They took that paper down, everything. But because of that just one paper by one person who, kind of manipulated data in a very statistically wrong way, to say that autism and vaccination has a link. So it's like, and also a lot of corporations also hire research teams, but the research teams obviously they already know what they have to prove. They just have to find out how they have to get a particular set of data to say that, okay, we can prove what they already wanted to prove anyway.
Like, even if there's 100 that says they're wrong, they look for one that tells them they're right, and they're like, yep, and we are correct the whole time.
Yeah. So that's also something that happens in both of our worlds. And that actually, again, in both of our worlds, that kind of dilutes, hurts, and harms the other aspect of it where we are involved, where it's about facts. It's a good time to start in journalism, especially when the concept of journalism is constantly under scrutiny, and that people are kind of trying to disregard journalism, and also during a time where you're associated with digital side of journalism and producing, which is interesting because right now print media, which has been doing so well for all these years, it's also kind of on a decline, and a lot of digital sources that are coming up are there were digital sources that were kind of like, there's this company that was like, okay, we are going to use AI so that we can give you news stories faster. There are companies in the US that are asking their journalists to constantly be on Twitter because that kind of gets digital traction. Like, there's a lot of that happening. And I hope that in that atmosphere you can kind of show a different side of digital media, which is as authentic and as reliable as the print media, but on digital form.
And like, for people, like, they think, I guess print media is in, like, people still read stories but just on their phones and stuff. Like, no one buys a newspaper anymore and stuff, and it's cheaper to produce, and we always have to keep up to date because we're like, there's always going to be a new social media platform or a new device, and we'll have to make sure we can tailor it for like that, and kind of thing. Like, I'm sure when Snapchat came out, people were like, and people started using it, you had to like think, okay, how
there were news stories that people put on Snapchat, right?
There was news like stories, there are news and stuff, so you have to like figure out, okay, how do we package it and suit the audience there, and the audience on Snapchat and Instagram might be different, kind of thing. So,
and I think it's just, there's so much. If people only paid for print media or just news, like, that's what happens, right? When you don't pay for journalism suffers, right? I just, like, when you don't pay, you also kind of, it's the same as social media, where if you're not paying for a service, you are kind of the product. I hope, and a lot of news sites are doing, they have like a paywall. Like, I think New York Times has like a paywall where they're like, you pay like a subscription even for digital.
You can read 10 stories, but after that you have to pay, kind of thing. And
that's a fair thing. And
that is a fair thing.
And still people don't want to pay. So.
And even though it's like $1 a week kind of thing, and you're like, it's just $1. You spend more on coffee a day.
And I'm not surprised. Like, Wikipedia still has to ask us every 2 months to support Wikipedia, and Wikipedia benefits all of us.
Exactly.
The reason I know anything that I know about Malaysia today is because of Wikipedia.
Even when I was writing that news story, I was like, we were talking about, why did they hate Gandhi? Wikipedia.
I knew that you use Wikipedia.
Because you quoted from it. That Wikipedia, even for Wikipedia, you have to be careful because everyone can change it. So you have to you see a fact, and then you're like, okay, double check.
What I normally do is that I open a Wikipedia article, I scroll down to the citations, and then read the citations. So it's like a hub.
It's like BuzzFeed. It's like, oh, maybe not.
I think that we have given a lot of information today, but there's also been a lot of discussions that I thought were very insightful, especially for me. On a lighter note, before we end this episode, how are you finding Australia and Brisbane?
I actually really like it here. I can't see myself living here forever. But even though like the news makes it look like, the Muslims are oppressed and stuff, I feel like I can be myself here as well. And like wherever I go, like sometimes there are like these ladies, they're middle-aged ladies, and they come up to me like, oh, I like your scarf, kind of thing. And it's like, it's always nice. And I feel like the people here are polite. Not that Malaysians aren't polite, but like like there's a huge difference.
Yeah.
So, but so far, yeah, I love it here, and I like that the culture of working at the EDC because I can see the difference between working there and I'm sure like working in Malaysia will be even stricter and stuff.
Right, right.
Yeah, and the people there, like, thankfully, I guess I'm fortunate to like be surrounded by people who are kind and understanding.
Yeah.
So I can't say that everything's okay for everyone out there, but over here it's nice.
Yeah. Also, were they one of the things that I forgot to touch upon
Yeah.
that I was curious about myself, if not anyone listening,
Yeah.
was that when I was doing when I still do my assignments and things like that in my degree, they're all about, they're not like made up assignments. They're like, one of my assignments, it's bizarre. One of my assignments was like, okay, so use bioinformatics to figure out what genes are associated with cancer that are not previously known. And I'm like, hold on, are you asking me to cure cancer? Is that what you're saying? And I did. Like, I didn't cure cancer. Okay. But like, I kind of...
You heard it here first from here.
That's actually, this is very naive, but I think it also comes from a good place. But when I was like starting out in science and people were like, why are you doing science? Because people are like, do medicine, do engineering.
Yeah.
I was like, no, I want to cure cancer. And I didn't mean it like as a joke or ironically. I just genuinely wanted to. I was like, yeah, I'll cure it. It was very naive, but it also came from a very a nice place. And I was like, I'll cure it. But yeah, so it was really nice to work on that assignment because it was academic, it was real, it was using the strategies that genuinely scientists use in bioinformatics. So this entire story was all to ask a question.
Oh, okay.
In your 3 years of degree in journalism, were there any assignments or assignment pieces that you had to do that actually related to the real world? Like, did they give you, okay, write the report? Like, were you actually working on real stories that now...
Oh, there was one real story. It was my second last semester. It was 70% assignment.
Wow.
That was fun. So we could come up, it's a journalism project, and we could come up with our news stories.
Yeah.
So, and one of the like topics was about Indigenous people in like Upper North Queensland.
Yeah.
So I had a friend from the Indigenous community. She lives in Cairns. So I went to interview her, and I interviewed her aunt. I interview her aunt who owns, who's an artist, and she uses traditional methods to dye clothes, but then she designs them for like in a modern way so that people can wear, and that's how she like encourages people to like learn more about Indigenous culture and like to pass it on.
Yeah.
So I felt like that was really interesting because one had to travel there, and you had to like meet the people, talk to them, and interview. And I had like a lot of footages and stuff, and having to pick and choose. And I felt like that was the closest thing I would ever have to like. Assignments are the same. You have to look for a news story and publish it. But this was like I felt it was more rewarding because it was more hands-on. Because like you actually had to look for it yourself, and you could go to your lecturer kind of thing because it took like the whole semester. But like the lecturer can only guide you, but they can't
give you this.
They can't do anything. During my attachments, I did like on behalf of uni. Like I did one in Malaysia. It was from my investigative journalist team, and they covered topics like child sexual grooming, human trafficking kind of thing.
Okay, wow,
yeah, heavy stuff. And I wasn't even the one with Al Jazeera was like, had to follow them to like go for this press conference for this guy whose daughter was murdered, like allegedly murdered by like officials 10 years ago, and she got bombed and stuff. And then, but because like there was a new government, they were going to reopen the case, so like it was heavy topics. But I remember like whenever I was there, even though the stories were really emotionally taxing, like after a long day, I would be like, I would lose faith in humanity and stuff. But I remember it like just sitting there and be like, oh, this is the journalism that I want to do. I'm on the right path, and everything is falling into its place and stuff.
Yeah.
So I guess like those were the topics that I wanted to do. So I would want to revisit those topics. Right. But when it comes to uni, I guess it's a bit hard because one, you do write a lot, and two, those stories are like old news.
Yeah.
Now even yesterday's news was like old news. There's only something to happen. But that's the fun thing about the job is that you don't know what story is going to come out.
Right.
And I find that I can't read fiction anymore because I'm like, real life is much more interesting and there's so much drama.
Right, because I think that's what journalists, because you all come across so much information.
Yeah.
And it's all information that's kind of, interesting in the sense that it's not normal.
Yeah.
That's what you report. Whatever you report you're not reporting normal. You're not reporting, cars were driving in the way that they're supposed to drive. Like you're obviously connected and working on stories that are unexpected. Yes. So yeah,
that you would never think of would actually happen, and it happens, kind of thing.
So I would understand why you wouldn't want to read John Green after that.
Yeah.
But thanks so much for this.
All good. Cool. Thank you for inviting me.
No, thank you for being here. Thank you for removing time for this podcast. I hope this was fun for you. This was really insightful.
Yes.
Because all of the parallels that I was thinking about was like something that I never thought of before.
The science and art and kind of thing. Yeah. People always think that science and art is so different, but these were more alike.
Yeah, extremely, especially
really
journalism and science, extremely alike.
Yeah.
And this podcast also, it's really surreal to talk about journalism on a podcast because I think there are parallels there too. And I hope I did because I think you are normally the ones who ask questions.
Yeah.
So I hope
it was nice being on the other side. Like, okay. Ooh.
I hope I did a decent job.
You did a good job. I'm just practicing for when Oprah interviews me. This is a good practice. I'm like, yeah.
Anytime you need to practice your Oprah or Ellen interviews, I'm always
here. Yeah, just invite me anytime. I'm like really cool. Really cool.
Did you just say I'm really cool?
No, I'm not really cool with it. Okay. Not really cool.
But thanks so much for being here. Everyone listening, I hope you all enjoyed. This is not...
Thank you for listening until the end.
Yeah,
and not skipping.
This wasn't very conventional because we delved deeply into topics. No, that is great. That was amazing. Cool. So yeah, thanks everyone, and I'll see you all next time. If you like this,
subscribe.
Yes, all of that. I'll see you all next time.
Are you gonna make it happen today? Or will you just settle for another delay? Come on, you gotta make it happen now. Come on, you gotta make it happen now. Sit. Are you gonna wait and sit on your hands? Or will you go and start making out a list of demands? Cause you can make it happen, so choose if it's your passion or move. But start attacking, don't lose out on the action. Are you gonna make it happen today? Or will you just settle for another delay? Come on, you gotta make it happen now. Come on.